Welcome, chosen one. Power isn't proven in peace, it's revealed in chaos. That's the line they forgot when they tried to drag your name through the dirt. Anybody can look composed when life is tidy, when the applause is loud, when alliances are solid and friendly, but true presence, real dominance, is born in the heat of the moment when the room turns cold. The tables flip without warning, and the knives come out from the very hands that once clapped for you. That's when people start watching closer. And that's exactly what just happened to you. They saw you navigate a messy, unpredictable situation with such composure that the drama itself started to look underfunded. They expected noise, panic, or at least some sign you'd lost control, but you moved like someone who had already read the ending. Psychologists say people decide who they truly trust in moments of conflict, not comfort. That's why the same voices that once doubted you are now second-guessing themselves. You didn't just survive the chaos, you defined it. And let's be honest, it wasn't just admiration in their eyes. It was something deeper. They weren't simply impressed, they were unsettled. Because you didn't just rise above the situation, you owned the altitude. You played the fool long enough to take notes. You kept receipts while they spent their dignity. You held your ground while they fumbled theirs. And now, someone's switching sides faster than a Wi-Fi signal in a storm, not because they've changed, but because the truth has finally made their position too uncomfortable to hold. The beauty of it all, you didn't need a mic drop moment. You didn't need a dramatic speech. You didn't have to prove them wrong in real time. You just sat still, anchored in who you are, and let the truth scream louder than their entire performance ever could. This isn't revenge. This isn't petty payback. This is revelation, the kind that shifts the room without you lifting a finger. And you, chosen one, are the headline they never saw coming. Before we dive in, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this work through Super Thanks. Your generosity helps keep these messages reaching the people who need them most. And whether you've given or not, hear me, I value you deeply. Your presence here, your time, your engagement, those are treasures money can't buy. Now, I want you to lock in with me for this message. If you're feeling that fire in your spirit already, type 777 inch the comments right now. Declare that you are aligned, ready, and standing in the strength God has been building in you all along. This is not just another video, this is confirmation. And if you've been wondering whether the shift you feel is real by the end of this message, you'll know it's already in motion. God's chosen ones, they're shocked by how you handled it now. Someone's switching sides. Number one, they watched you stand in a storm and realized they'd sink in your silence. Chosen one. Do you remember the last time life's winds howled so loud, it seemed the whole world was leaning in, waiting for you to break? They expected chaos from you. They expected tears, shouting, slammed doors, a performance that would confirm every rumor they whispered behind closed doors. In their minds, your reaction would be the proof they needed to label you unstable, overdramatic, or finished. But instead, you gave them the one thing they never prepared for: silence. And this wasn't the silence of defeat. This was the silence of mastery. The stillness of someone who refuses to let chaos dictate the rhythm of their soul. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." That's exactly what you embodied, not a retreat, but a holy posture. You weren't hiding. You were holding the line, choosing not to fuel, a fire designed to consume you. Have you ever noticed how your quiet unsettles people more than your words ever could? Why do you think that is? It's because your silence is not empty. It's loaded with awareness, discernment, and the unshakable truth that you don't have to defend what God has already secured. Look at Nelson Mandela's trial in 1964. Instead of raging against injustice with desperation, he stood with calm dignity, speaking few but deliberate words. That composure didn't just protect him, it disarmed his oppressors. Chosen one. That's the energy you carried in your own storm, while others scrambled to speak louder, to shout over the wind. You let the storm pass over you without giving it your voice. Most people only understand strength through noise. In their world, the loudest person in the room wins. But you have tapped into a deeper truth, that quiet authority is far more unsettling. Proverbs 17:27 reminds us, the one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. Your restraint was not passivity, it was power under control, and that scares those who rely on intimidation to feel strong. Think about Queen Elizabeth II during political crises. She never jumped into public brawls. She mastered the art of letting her silence become the loudest thing in the room. You did the same. You didn't threaten, beg, or explain. You simply stood in the heart of a messy situation with nothing to prove and everything to withstand. That's when your silence turned from a defense into a weapon. While they were panicking, you were calculating. While they were gossiping, you were listening. While they were plotting your downfall, you were positioning yourself for victory. And because you didn't move like them, they had to study you. Isn't it strange how those who once underestimated you suddenly started analyzing your every move? It's the same thing we see in the story of Daniel. When thrown into the lion's den, Daniel didn't cry out or plead for his life. He simply trusted God. And by morning, his enemies were the ones trembling. Daniel 6:23. No kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Your storm was your lion's den, and your composure was your testimony. Fear crept into them the moment they realized, if you can stay that composed under fire, what are you capable of when you're free, focused, and unbothered? The silence they mistook for weakness became your greatest flex. It became a mirror that exposed their own noise, guilt, and insecurity. And in that mirror, your power was undeniable. Look at Serena Williams. When she's on the court and an opponent tries to provoke her, she doesn't need to shout back. Her game speaks. Her focus becomes her answer. You did the same. You let your actions and endurance speak in volumes that words could never reach. And here's the thing about storms. They reveal who can swim and who will sink. You didn't compete with the chaos. You simply stood where they couldn't. That's why some of them are switching sides now. Not because they've suddenly developed moral clarity, but because your calm made their confusion unbearable. It reminds me of Jesus asleep in the boat during the storm in Mark 4:39. The disciples were frantic, certain they'd drown. But Jesus rose and simply said, "Peace, be still." The storm obeyed him. Chosen one. Your silence carried that same weight. You didn't have to shout the wind into obedience. Your stillness carried divine authority. When they realized they couldn't even float where you stood still, their fear turned into fascination. Isn't it interesting how some who once spoke against you are now drawing closer? But here's the truth. Some aren't joining you because they've changed. They're joining because they can't survive without your stability. Consider Mahatma Gandhi's non-violent resistance. His refusal to meet aggression with aggression was not weakness. It was a force that dismantled empires. Your quiet authority works the same way. It is an unspoken challenge. If you want to rattle me, you'll have to first master yourself. Inframus, Isaiah 30:15 says, "In quietness and in trust shall be your strength." And you, chosen one, have lived that truth. You turn silence into strategy, composure into currency, and stillness into strength. But here's the question you must ask yourself now. Will you allow these people switching sides to walk with you into your next chapter? Or will you let your discernment decide who gets close? Not everyone who comes to you after the storm is a true ally. Some are simply seeking shelter from the waves. They can't stand in alone. Remember the story of Oprah Winfrey early in her career. She was underestimated, criticized, even told she'd never succeed in television. Instead of publicly battling every critic, she focused on building her craft and platform. Her quiet consistency didn't just silence her critics, it turned them into witnesses of her rise. Your storm has done the same. It has separated the loud pretenders from the true supporters. It has revealed who's here because they see your value and who's here because they fear your strength. And it has proven one unshakable truth: chosen one. You are not defined by the noise around you, but by the God who stands within you. As you step into the next season, hold on to 2 Thessalonians 3:16. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times in every way. The Lord be with you all. Your silence was not just a survival tactic. It was a prophetic statement. I am anchored in something deeper than this storm. Oh, so let them study you. Let them switch sides if they must. Just remember, your strength is not in proving them wrong. Your strength is in walking forward, unshaken, into the destiny that was never theirs to control. Number 2, you didn't retaliate. You let gravity do the exposing. Chosen one. Think about the last time someone tried to drag you into a fight. You didn't start. They wanted you flustered, defensive, loud. They were waiting for the perfect moment to point a finger and say, "See, I told you they're just like the rest." But instead, you refused to play the part they wrote for you. You chose stillness over struggle. You let gravity, the unshakable law that everything false eventually falls, do all the exposing. Why is that so unsettling to your enemies? Because they depend on reaction to survive. They feed on your energy. They need you to flinch so they can validate their lies. But when you don't respond, they are left shouting into the void, and suddenly, all that noise starts to sound suspicious to everyone else. Look at Joseph in Genesis 39 to 21. When Potiphar's wife falsely accused him, Joseph didn't launch a public defense campaign. He allowed the truth to rise in God's timing. And the Bible says, "The Lord was with him and gave him favor." That's what happened with you. Your decision to keep your energy clean created space for the truth to breathe. Think about how Martin Luther King Jr. responded to constant attacks. He didn't return insult for insult. He understood that keeping the moral high ground eventually turns the crowd's attention to the real aggressor. You did the same. While they spun the narrative, you stayed grounded. And because of that, little cracks began to appear in their story. Lies don't age well. They decay in public view. Isn't it interesting how, without your involvement, their alliances began to crumble? People started noticing contradictions. That friend they swore was loyal suddenly had a different version of events. Their desperate grabs for attention became more obvious. As Proverbs 12:19 says, "Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment." Lo, let's be honest, you knew this was coming. You knew that what's fake will eventually collapse under its own weight. That's why you didn't need to rush in with accusations. You trusted the process. Much like Maya Angelou once said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You didn't try to prove their guilt. You let their actions do the talking. And here's the part that rattled the most. You weren't just silent, you were unbothered. Your refusal to engage wasn't passive, it was powerful. Gandhi mastered this in his non-violent resistance. The refusal to lower himself to the oppressor's level became his greatest weapon. You walked away. And in doing so, the whole setup collapsed. Psalm 37:7 tells us, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways." That's exactly what you did. You knew time and truth were stronger allies than retaliation could ever be. Now they're scrambling. Aren't they? Trying to clean up what they created? Pretending they didn't mean it like that. Rewriting history to save face. But it's too late. The crowd they once manipulated is now suspicious. Replaying every detail. Questioning every word. Consider Princess Diana. When the tabloids painted her as unstable, she didn't try to argue with every headline. She carried herself with grace. And over time, the public saw through the smear campaigns. Your journey has mirrored that wisdom, quiet dignity always outlasts noisy deception. And the best part, while they were busy talking, you were becoming undeniable. Your silence was not empty. It was echoing through the room. It was a reminder that true strength doesn't need an audience to win. Ephesians 6:13 says, after you have done everything, to stand. And stand you did long enough for gravity to do what you never had to. So, chosen one, ask yourself, now that the masks have slipped and the truth has surfaced, will you let some of these people back into your life? Or will you protect your space, knowing that your peace is too costly to gamble? Number 3, you handled it like someone who knew the outcome wasn't in the moment, but in the mirror. Chosen one. Have you noticed how most people treat conflict like a race? They sprint to be the first to speak, the first to defend themselves, the first to win the argument. They believe if they don't dominate the moment, they've lost forever. But you saw the bigger picture. You knew the outcome wasn't decided in the heat of the moment, but in the quiet reflection afterward. That's wisdom few can grasp. You understood that your legacy matters more than a quick victory. Proverbs 22:1-6. A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. While they fought for applause, you fought for your integrity. Consider how Michelle Obama responded to public attacks. She famously said, "When they go low, they go high." She wasn't worried about winning a moment. She was guarding her character for the long term. You carried that same discipline. While they tried to paint you as the villain, you asked yourself the deeper question, who do I want to be when this storm passes? And that question became your compass. It kept you from reacting recklessly. It reminded you that storms are temporary, but reputations can last a lifetime. King David modeled this in 1 Samuel 24:12, when he refused to harm Saul even when he had the chance, saying, "May the Lord judge between you and me." He valued God's view over man's approval, just like you did. Think about how Denzel Washington carries himself in Hollywood. Surrounded by gossip and competition, he avoids messy public feuds. Instead, he lets decades of consistent integrity speak for him. That's what you've been doing, letting the mirror, not the moment, decide your actions. While they tried to pull you into chaos, you were building something else, self-control. and self-control always makes immaturity look smaller. Eclesiastes 7:8 The end of a matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. You didn't spiral, you didn't match their energy, and because of that, people started to notice the contrast. They stopped asking, "What happened to you?" and started asking, "What's wrong with them?" That's the shift you've been waiting for, the day when their behavior speaks louder than their accusations. Oprah Winfrey has a saying, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." You endured that uncomfortable waiting period, trusting that the truth would outlast the noise, and it did. Over time, the temporary drama faded, but your name remained intact. Reputation isn't built in drama, it's revealed by how you carry yourself through it. That's why people are switching sides now. They've seen the two versions of the story, the one your enemies crafted, and the one you lived. And yours has aged like fine wine, stronger, cleaner. Indéniable. Philippiens 4:5 says, "Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near." That gentleness was your anchor. It didn't mean you were weak, it meant you were unshaken. Look at Winston Churchill during WWIE. He didn't just respond to every German provocation with panic. He kept his eyes on the bigger picture, winning the war, not just the battle of the day. You've done the same. So, chosen one, here's the real question. Now that you've come through the storm with your reflection intact, what will you build with the credibility you've earned? You didn't just survive this, you've positioned yourself as someone whose name carries weight. And that's why, even now, your presence is rewriting the narrative. Your enemies played for the moment. You played for the mirror, and the mirror won. Number 4. The mess wasn't a problem. It was a proving ground. Chosen one. Have you realized yet that the mess you went through was never really about the mess? That the chaos that tried to swallow you was actually an arena, a proving ground where the strength inside you was revealed to everyone watching. Some people crumble when things get ugly. They scatter when pressure hits, pointing fingers, shifting blame, and retreating to hide. But you stood right there in the middle of the wreckage, calm as a mountain, and somehow made it look intentional, like it was part of the plan all along. What kind of person can stand in that kind of fire and not flinch? What kind of soul refuses to panic when lies, betrayal, and confusion are closing in? Only someone who understands that storms are not sent to destroy the chosen, they're sent to display them. Isaías 43:2 declares, "When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." That verse wasn't just words on a page for you, it became your reality. The chaos that was meant to shatter you became your showcase. People expected to see desperation in your eyes, but instead they saw direction. They anticipated that you'd fight to defend your name in every conversation, but instead you let your presence speak for itself. Your calm, your restraint, your refusal to be dragged into the mud, they all shouted louder than any defense ever could. Think of Nelson Mandela in prison for 27 years. He could have emerged bitter, vengeful, ready to attack those who wronged him. Instead, he came out with grace, discipline, and the ability to unite a nation. Chosen one. That's the same quiet but undeniable authority you walked in, while others scrambled to be heard. You built proof that you could be unshaken, that you could lead yourself, that you could move through fire without losing your form. The situation was supposed to ruin your image. Instead, it revealed your essence. It stripped away every illusion and left only the unbreakable parts. You were tested, in front of the same people who expected your collapse, and you passed with a kind of grace that's rare in this world. James 1:12 reminds us, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life." Whether they realize it or not, they saw a crown on you that day. Look at Malala Yousafzai. She faced a violent attack intended to silence her forever. Yet she stood taller afterward, becoming an even greater voice for education and justice. Your storm worked the same way. It amplified you. People thought they'd see you fold under pressure, but instead they saw something far more dangerous. Someone who does not crumble, even when surrounded by lies and betrayal. Here's the truth. The mess was never about the surface level situation. It was about exposing the hidden layers. Their insecurities showed, their masks slipped, their loyalty cracked, and in that same light, your strength came forward. You didn't react, you refined. You didn't shout, you sharpened. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The storm became your blacksmith's forge, shaping you into someone more precise, more powerful, more prepared. While everyone else was distracted by the drama, you were quietly passing a test. Most people fail without even knowing they were taking it. You didn't just survive, you advanced. That's the thing about being chosen. Your trials are never wasted. They are classrooms, stages, and proving grounds rolled into one. Think about Harriet Tubman, surrounded by danger and betrayal. She still led people to freedom again and again. She didn't let the chaos dictate her movements. She moved with purpose, no matter the noise. Chosen one. Your restraint and discipline had the same effect. You showed that you could stand tall in places where others can't even breathe. That's why this moment became your proving ground. Not because you came out swinging, but because you stood with discipline, dignity, and direction. And that's not luck, that's identity. Galatians 6:9 Jesus. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. You didn't just hold your ground, you demonstrated that your foundation was built on something eternal, and people noticed. Even those who doubted you began rethinking their position. You see, storms have a way of reorganizing the room. The ones who only stood with you when things were easy suddenly had to choose: would they back away in fear, or stand near someone whose strength makes them look small? Consider LeBron James when he left Cleveland for Miami. The backlash was intense. People predicted his collapse. But he didn't rush to defend himself with words. He let his performance prove his decision. Eventually, the same critics had to acknowledge his dominance. Your journey mirrored that lesson. When you live out your truth with consistency, even the ones who bet against you have to revise their stories. The mess didn't destroy you, it introduced you, not as a victim, not even just as a survivor, but as a leader in your own life. The kind who doesn't need to raise their voice to shift the atmosphere, the kind who can hold still in the middle of chaos, because you know God's hand is holding you steady. Psalm 18:2 says, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress and my deliverer, my shield in whom I take refuge." That's the shield you carried, whether anyone else could see it or not. So now the room sees you differently. The storm didn't just pass, it rewrote your reputation. You weren't exposed by it, you were revealed by it. And that's what makes you dangerous to anyone who hoped to see you fall. Chosen one. Here's the final question for you. Now that you've been proven in the fire, what will you build with the credibility you've earned? Because storms don't last forever, but the authority you gain from enduring one that stays. Number 5. They expected emotion. You gave them execution. Chosen one. Have you noticed how some people don't just watch you, they wait for you to crack? They sit on the sidelines, hoping for the day you'll cry in public, yell without thinking, spiral into bad decisions, or clap back so hard you lose control. Why? Because your meltdown would be the evidence they've been craving. It would make their false stories look like the truth. Have you ever wondered why they want you emotional so badly? Because emotion is easier to weaponize than excellence. They thought they had you figured out. They thought pressure would make you burst. But when the moment came, you didn't give them chaos. You gave them composure. You didn't give them a breakdown. You gave them a blueprint. Psalm 37:23 says, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way." You walked in ordered steps, not in emotional stumbling. Think about Serena Williams in the middle of a heated tennis match. She has the fire to fight, but also the discipline to keep her game sharp. You carried the same duality. You stayed grounded, collected, and focused, and that shook them far more than any outburst could. Tell me, chosen one, how many times have you bit your tongue? Not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew the timing wasn't right. That's not weakness. That's strategy. While they expected you to play checkers, you were playing chess. You didn't entertain the drama. You studied it. You became an observer in your own storm. You watched who whispered in corners, who suddenly went silent, who switched sides without explanation. But you didn't chase them for answers. Why? Because you knew the truth always outlives a rumor. Proverbs 19:11 says, "A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense." You understood that ignoring bait is sometimes the loudest declaration of strength. Consider Michael Jordan during the infamous flu game. Every critic expected him to collapse under the pressure of illness. Instead, he delivered one of the greatest performances in sports history. You moved the same way, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Let me ask you this. How many people have lost access to you? Not because you hate them, but because they can't be trusted with your reactions. That's the moment your power shifted, when you realized not everyone deserves a front row seat to your emotions. They wanted you to be loud. You became surgical. They wanted you distracted. You became deliberate. You started handling things behind the scenes, moving pieces that no one even knew existed. And while they were waiting for you to post your pain, you were building something they couldn't stop. Look at Jeff Bezos. When critics mocked Amazon in the early years, he didn't get into public spats. He let results speak. Over time, those results silenced every doubter. You've done the same, letting wins do the talking while staying silent about your strategies. And isn't it interesting how now, the same people who once wanted to see you fall are watching your next move with curiosity, maybe even respect. They're no longer talking about how you felt, they're talking about what you did. Eclesiastes 9:11 reminds us, the race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, but time and chance happen to them all. You waited for your moment, and when it came, you moved with precision. Your stillness wasn't passive, it was exact. It was the kind of stillness a surgeon has before making an incision. Steady hands, clear mind, focused aim. That's what made the shift. You understood that your next steps would speak louder than any emotional reaction, and they did. Think about how Barack Obama handled criticism during his presidency. He didn't rush to counter every attack. He stayed the course, kept his focus on the bigger picture, and let time reveal his record. That's exactly the energy you carried, results over reactions. Tell me, chosen one, have you felt how the room changes when you walk in now? People lean in differently. They watch you differently. Why? Because your presence has started speaking volumes. Your words never had to. That's the mark of execution over emotion. Romans 12, 21 says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." You overcame not by out-yelling your critics, but by outgrowing them. And here's what's powerful: you didn't stop feeling. You just stopped bleeding for people who wanted to see you wounded. That's a turning point most never reach. That's when you stopped trying to prove a point and started shifting the entire narrative. Look at Beyoncé during the controversy after her 2013 inauguration performance. Instead of defending herself endlessly, she simply delivered an unshakable live performance days later that silenced every critic. That's what execution looks like, letting action settle the argument. Now, the story isn't about the drama anymore. It's about your discipline. It's about how you controlled the room without raising your voice. It's about how you redirected all that emotional energy into growth, wins, and elevation. So, what will your next move be? Will you keep operating in silence, letting the results stack up until even your enemies have to acknowledge them? Or will you step into a new level where no one even dares expect a meltdown from you again? Philippiens 3:14 says, "I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus." That's where you're headed now, toward the prize, not toward proving them wrong. And remember, chosen one, the lesson here is eternal. They came looking for feelings, but left with a lesson. They wanted emotion. You gave them execution. And now, even without speaking, your presence commands the respect they never planned to give you. Number 6 people thought the mess would destroy you, but it was your grand reveal. Chosen one, have you ever noticed how some people don't just anticipate your downfall, they prepare for it? They set their eyes on you like vultures circling, waiting for the moment you collapse so they can finally say, "I knew it." That's exactly what happened here. They thought the storm would shake your foundation. They were certain this would be the event that ruined your name, shattered your image, and proved to everyone that you were not built for pressure. But, oh, how wrong they were. Instead of crumbling, you turned the entire situation into something they never predicted, your grand reveal. You didn't audition for the spotlight. Yet there it was, aimed squarely at you, and instead of shrinking back into the shadows, you owned it. They expected damage. You gave them dominance. Let me ask you, how many times in your life have you walked into a fire and realized it wasn't there to burn you, but to illuminate you? Isaiah 61:3 says God gives his people a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. That's exactly what happened. You stepped into the heat, and instead of letting it consume you, you let it refine you. Look at Winston Churchill during the darkest days of WWIE, when the whole world was predicting defeat. He didn't collapse under the weight of fear. He used the chaos as a platform to show unwavering resolve. You did the same. The same heat they thought would break you became the light that revealed just how controlled your flame really is. You weren't out of control. You were in command. That's what rattled them most. They expected you to stumble, to flinch, to beg for relief. But you moved through the chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra, calm, measured, in perfect rhythm with your purpose. The moment people saw that, the narrative shifted. The gossip stopped holding weight. The noise faded. Your presence became the headline. And here's the truth. Some people don't even know their real strength until the ground beneath them starts shaking. That was you. You didn't need everything to be perfect to look powerful. You looked powerful while everything was falling apart around you. That's why people couldn't look away. Proverbs 24:10. If you falter in a time of trouble, how small is your strength? But you didn't falter, you fortified. Think of Malala Yousafzai. An attempt was made to silence her voice forever. But instead, she emerged even more determined, speaking to the world with authority. Chosen one. You carried that same energy. When they were expecting pity, you gave them performance, not in a theatrical sense, but in the precision of your composure. While others unraveled, you remained solid. While they scrambled for cover, you stood your ground. And in doing so, you exposed just how unprepared they were. The situation they designed to break you ended up revealing the truth. You were always more prepared than they imagined. Doesn't it make you wonder what goes through their minds now? If this was supposed to be your breaking point, and you still came out sharper, calmer, and wiser, what are you capable of when the conditions are actually in your favor? Philippians 1:28 says, "Without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you, this is a sign to them that they will be destroyed, but that you will be saved, and that by God." Your composure became a sign they couldn't ignore. Consider Steve Jobs. After being fired from Apple, the company he founded, many wrote him off. But instead of being destroyed, he used that season to sharpen his vision, eventually returning to lead one of the greatest corporate turnarounds in history. That's the kind of reversal you embodied, turning rejection into reinvention. The chaos didn't crush you. It introduced the version of you they didn't believe existed, the version that is unbothered by rumors, unwilling to chase apologies, and moving with purpose rather than panic. You turned their trap into your platform, and without uttering many words, you made the whole room watch you differently. How many of those people who once whispered now adjust their posture when you enter the room? How many who doubted you now hang on your next move? The same mouths that predicted your downfall are now silent, or worse for them, speaking your name with respect. Psalm 66:12 says, "We went through fire and water, but you brought us to a place of abundance." That's your testimony. You didn't just survive the fire, you conducted it. You directed its heat, you let it light you, instead of scorch you. Look at Oprah Winfrey's early career. She was demoted from her news anchor job because they said she wasn't fit for television. That failure became the catalyst for her talk show, which turned her into one of the most influential media figures in the world. The same dynamic unfolded in your life. They thought they'd written your ending, but you simply started a new chapter. And here's the part they'll never forget. You did it all with control. You didn't need to shout your way through the storm. You didn't need to expose every lie or clap back at every critic. You let your results, your poise, and your divine positioning do the talking. Romans 8:31 asks, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" That's what the room felt when you walked through the mess untouched. They didn't just see survival, they saw ascension, and that changes everything. So, chosen one, now that you've been revealed in this way, what will you do with the platform the storm handed you? Will you use it to build something new, to step into a greater level of influence, to lead in spaces where others fear to enter? Because make no mistake, the test wasn't just to prove you could survive. It was to prove you could lead in the very environment where others can't even breathe. And you passed it with such precision that the only logical response now is respect. You didn't just endure the mess, you ran it. You didn't crumble in the fire, you conducted it. And now the world knows you were never built to be destroyed. You were built to be revealed. Number 7. Someone switched sides, not because they changed, but because they were exposed. Chosen one. You already knew this wasn't about loyalty, didn't you? From the start, it was about image. Some people don't stand with truth. They stand with whatever looks safest in the moment. Have you noticed that? They don't commit to anyone, they just float toward the side that seems less risky to their own reputation. And during your storm, that's exactly what happened. They weren't cheering for you. But they weren't openly against you either. They parked themselves in the gray zone, neutral, silent, conveniently distant. Why? Because they didn't want to get caught defending the wrong side. They were playing optics, not choosing conviction. And now, as the smoke clears, the truth is becoming obvious. The people who stayed solid are shining. The ones who sat back and waited, they're scrambling. They're circling back with fake smiles, claiming they always knew you'd come out on top. But did they really? Or were they just watching, hoping their silence wouldn't cost them later? Proverbs 26:23 says, "Like a coating of silver dross on earthenware are fervent lips with an evil heart." Their sudden enthusiasm isn't about your victory, it's about self-preservation. Think about Winston Churchill's wartime allies. Some nations only joined the fight against Hitler after the tide turned, when they saw who was likely to win. That's the spirit you're seeing here. This support isn't built on faith in you, it's built on fear of being left on the losing side of history. So what changed for them? Not their heart, their calculation. The same person who sat back while you were being torn apart is now showing up, not because they care, but because you came out looking better than they predicted. They're not standing next to you out of loyalty. They're standing there because the light now favors your side of the room. Jesus experienced this in John 6:26. When the crowd followed him after the miracle of feeding the 5,000, he told them, "You are looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill." They weren't following truth, they were following benefit. Think of Taylor Swift's career. In her early disputes with the industry, certain media voices stayed neutral or quietly critical. But when her power and influence became undeniable, some of those same voices switched sides, suddenly praising her artistry. It wasn't conviction, it was exposure. They call it growth. They call it finally seeing things clearly. But what they're really seeing is the public shift, the respect you're gaining, the power you've held without clapping back, the grace you've shown without groveling. That's what they want to be connected to. But you see through it, don't you? You can feel the difference between someone who truly believes in you and someone who's just trying to stand where it's safe. Real recognizes real. And what you're recognizing here is survival instinct, not transformation. Nehemiah faced the same thing when rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. At first, many stood back, mocking the effort. But when the work began to succeed, some tried to align themselves with the project to save face. Nehemiah didn't let them dilute the mission. So here's the question. Will you allow these latecomers to walk with you into your next season? Or will you remember where they stood when your integrity was under fire? Look at LeBron James when he returned to Cleveland after winning championships in Miami. Many fans who once burned his jersey came running back to cheer. Not all returned out of love. Many came back because winning makes people forget their earlier stance. Chosen one. Understand this. Their presence now isn't proof of their loyalty then. This isn't enlightenment, it's exposure. The truth came out, and their indecision became too uncomfortable to hide. Psalm 118:8 says, "It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man." So don't build your next moves on shaky alliances. Let them adjust their posture if they want. Just know why they're doing it. Because loyalty that shifts with the spotlight isn't loyalty at all. Number 8, you didn't clear your name. Your evolution made theirs irrelevant. Chosen one. Here's the truth. You never had to defend yourself. You didn't run around trying to correct every rumor or beg people to see your side. You didn't waste breath explaining yourself to those already committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you chose something infinitely more powerful. You grew, and growth, real growth, does what arguments never can. It rewrites the story without touching a word. While they were busy gossiping, you were busy becoming. While they were building cliques, you were building character. While they were throwing shade under the disguise of concern, you were sharpening your skills, deepening your faith, and aligning with your true purpose. Isaiah 54:17 says, "No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you." Notice it doesn't say you'll refute them with endless explanations. Sometimes the refuting happens through undeniable results. Think about Michelle Obama. She's faced waves of criticism and false narratives, yet she rarely engages in public disputes. Instead, she focuses on her work, her causes, her voice. Over time, her presence has made many criticisms look small and petty. That's the same power you've tapped into. They stayed stuck in the same drama loops. You evolved into someone they can't even sit next to comfortably anymore. Not because you've become arrogant, but because your presence alone exposes the pettiness they tried to hide behind noise. Philippians 3:13-14 reminds us, "Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal." That's exactly what you did. You didn't step into their chaos, you stepped into your calling. Consider Steve Jobs again. When critics mocked Apple's future after his departure, he didn't fight them in the press. He focused on innovation. And when he returned, the products themselves silenced the doubters. Your growth has worked the same way. It's made the lies irrelevant without you having to touch them. You built something so solid, so undeniable, that their rumors sound childish next to your reality. That's what elevation does. It ends conversations without needing to raise your voice. Now, the same people who mocked you behind closed doors speak about you with careful words. David, in 1 Samuel 18, experienced this too. After defeating Goliath, the same people who doubted him couldn't explain away his victory. His growth in the eyes of the nation made their earlier dismissal irrelevant. Think of Oprah Winfrey's rise. People in her early career tried to box her into stereotypes. She didn't waste time convincing them. She was more, she just became more. Now those early narratives don't even register. They never had real power over your name. They only filled in the silence while you were still becoming. But now your growth is loud, your purpose visible, and their voices small. All they can do is fall quiet or awkwardly try to align with you. So, will you even notice their approval now? Or have you reached a place where their opinions no longer touch you? Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." You chose transformation, and it took you beyond the reach of their narratives. Chosen one. This is the final victory. You didn't win by clearing your name. You won by outgrowing their relevance. They can't touch you now, not because you proved them wrong, but because you've gone somewhere they can't follow. And where you're going next, their names won't even come up in the conversation. Number 9. They thought you were who they understood. You turned out to be who they feared. Chosen one. There's a strange kind of shock people experience when they realize their read on you was completely wrong. They thought you were simple, predictable, soft. They looked at your stillness and decided it meant weakness. They saw your kindness and assumed it was naive. They mistook your calm for emptiness. In their mind, you were safe to underestimate. What they never grasped was that your stillness wasn't the absence of power, it was the mastery of it. Proverbs 19:2 says, "Desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet miss the way?" They were rushing to conclusions while you were quietly building an inner fortress. You were never scrambling for their approval. You were observing, calculating, learning exactly who was who. Look at Albert Einstein. For years, his quiet demeanor and unorthodox thinking were dismissed, but beneath the surface, he was reshaping the way the world understood the universe. You've done the same in your world, refusing to telegraph your strength until the right moment. They judged you by what they could see on the surface, your refusal to chase conflict, your choice not to expose them, your decision not to retaliate. But now the tables have turned. The truth is louder than the lies. Your name carries weight they didn't think it could, and suddenly, they're realizing how dangerous their misjudgment was. It's the same dynamic David faced before confronting Goliath. People saw only a shepherd boy, but God had been training him quietly in the fields. By the time the battle came, David wasn't just capable, he was lethal to the giants' plans. While they were chasing short-term wins and playing petty games, you were building something unshakable inside yourself. They thought they could control the room. Now they can't even walk into it without feeling your presence. That's the part they never accounted for. You're still becoming, still rising. Oprah Winfrey's career tells a similar story. Early on, some tried to box her in, assuming her voice would never reach beyond certain limits. Decades later, her influence is global, and those early critics have long been irrelevant. Now they're switching sides, not from admiration, but from survival. They don't want to be your enemy anymore, because they've realized you were never the quiet voice in the corner. You were the storm that doesn't shout, the leader that doesn't beg, the force that doesn't need validation. Isaiah 30:15 reminds us, "In quietness and trust is your strength." You embodied that, and it unsettled them. Consider Muhammad Ali. His opponents often underestimated him because of his showmanship, not realizing how calculated and strategic he truly was. By the time they understood, it was too late. The stillness they mocked, the grace they misunderstood, has now become the exact energy they want to align with, not because they love you, but because they fear what it means to oppose you. They've learned the hard way that you were never small. They were just too shallow to recognize the scale of your presence. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You showed them who you are by standing firm. And now they can't undo what they've seen." Proverbs 21:30 says, "There is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord." Your rise was never theirs to control, and now they know it. Number 10. You weren't defending your image. You were protecting your peace. Chosen one. You could have spoken up. You had the facts, the receipts, the full story. You could have corrected every lie and shut down every false narrative while people ran wild with edited versions and assumptions. But you didn't. Not because you didn't know what to say, but because you understood early on that proving yourself to the wrong audience is wasted energy. Peace, for you, has always been more valuable than applause. John 14:27 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." You weren't clinging to your pride, you were guarding your sanity. Think of Michelle Obama again. She has faced constant criticism, but rarely engages in public battles. She focuses on her purpose, trusting that her work will speak for itself. You followed a similar path, letting your life's fruit be your defense. Real ones never needed to be convinced. They saw through the noise. They felt your intentions. The rest? They were temporary, entertained by the spectacle, not invested in the truth. And you were done performing for that crowd. Nelson Mandela's years in prison illustrate this power. He didn't waste energy defending himself to those who refused to listen. He preserved his mind and spirit, so that when freedom came, he was prepared to lead. You too chose preservation over pointless argument. You weren't trying to win the crowd. You were determined not to lose yourself. That kind of discipline is rare. Ecclesiastes 7-9 warns, "Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools." You mastered restraint because you valued what came after the storm more than the storm itself. Steve Jobs, after being pushed out of Apple, didn't waste years fighting the board in the press. He focused on building Nexty and Pixar. When the time was right, he returned stronger. That's what you've done. You let your focus build your future, while the noise burned itself out. Your silence was never weakness. It was wisdom. You didn't run from the mess. You simply refused to sit in it. You allowed people to form their little circles, share their twisted versions, and feed each other's assumptions. But none of it touched you because you understood something they didn't. Peace is expensive. It costs you your ego, your pride, and sometimes your right to be right. But it pays you back in clarity, healing, and strength. Philippians 4:7 promise. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That peace became your shield. Consider Taylor Swift's re-recording of her albums. Instead of waging endless public battles over ownership, she reclaimed her work on her own terms. She didn't just defend her image, she changed the entire conversation. You knew that those who truly mattered would either never believe the lies or eventually see through them. Everyone else, they were always temporary. So instead of defending yourself, you elevated, you outgrew the noise, and now, the silence they once mistook for guilt has become the strength they can't stop noticing. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still, and know that I am God." You lived that, and now your stillness has become the loudest statement of all. Number 11, you didn't fight back because you knew the story would age, and you were the only timeless thing in it. Chosen one. You've always seen the bigger picture, haven't you? While others panic in the moment, scrambling to shape how they're seen, you've understood a truth they could never grasp. The story doesn't end in the first telling. It evolves, it breathes, and time has a way of pulling off masks that the urgency of the moment tries to glue in place. You knew the truth always stretches further than the instant it's told. Proverbs 12:19 says, "Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment." That's why you didn't rush to defend yourself. You understood that character outlives gossip, and integrity outlasts headlines. You weren't trying to control the room. You were letting the room watch and wait. Think about how Maya Angelou carried herself in public life. She didn't waste her energy rebutting every false assumption. She stayed consistent in her values and let her body of work define her legacy. That's the approach you took, not because you lacked words, but because you knew your actions and results would always speak louder than reactive statements. While they were frantically trying to manage the optics, you were tending to the roots of your life. Roots take time. They grow in silence, away from applause. But when the seasons change, they hold up a tree that no storm can topple. Psalm 1-3 describes it perfectly. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season. Whatever they do prospers. You were building something that would last beyond this chapter. They thought your silence meant defeat. They assumed the lack of a rebuttal meant you had nothing to say. But you had everything to say. You simply chose a language they couldn't mimic. Consistency. Consider how Michelle Obama handled years of public criticism. She didn't jump into every battle or chase every rumor. Instead, she showed the world who she was through her conduct, her work, and her steadiness over time. Even her critics had to acknowledge the depth and grace she carried. Your stillness was never passive. It was deliberate. You understood that lies have expiration dates. But the truth ages like fine wine, and when those lies expire, they don't just disappear. They leave behind a space only reality can fill. You knew that space would be filled with your steady record, your proven presence, your undeniable track record. When you let them talk, you weren't surrendering. You were allowing their words to date themselves. Ecclesiastes 3:11 reminds us, He has made everything beautiful in its time, and time has proven you beautiful in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Think of Nelson Mandela. After being falsely imprisoned for decades, he didn't emerge seeking revenge or obsessing over clearing his name. His release and subsequent leadership revealed his character without him having to say, "I told you so." Laman, you weren't interested in battling every rumor. You were more interested in becoming someone their rumors couldn't touch. You didn't waste your energy on rebuttals. You invested it into growth. And while they were busy writing their version of events, you were quietly writing the one that would last. Now that time has passed. The difference is startling. Everything they constructed feels cheap, brittle, and temporary. Why? Because their story was designed for the moment. Yours was built for the long game. Isaiah 40:8 says, "The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever." Truth has endurance. Lies do not. Look at Steve Jobs. When critics said Apple was finished after his departure, he didn't fight in the press. He built, and when he returned, the results spoke so loudly that old narratives became irrelevant overnight. What they didn't realize was that you weren't trying to win a sprint. You were running a marathon, and marathons require patience, pacing, and faith in the finish line. Over time, the plot has matured. The characters have revealed themselves, and the one who never scrambled to control the story turned out to be the one writing the truest version all along. Your strength was in staying aligned. John 8:32 declares, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." You trusted that in time, the surface would crack, and what's real would rise. That noise would fade. That integrity would remain, and it has. Think of Malala Yousafzai again. She didn't chase every lie told about her. She focused on her mission. Now her voice carries more weight than the rumors ever did. Because purpose ages better than drama. Now they look around, bewildered. How did you become so respected, so supported, without ever explaining yourself? How is it that people listen when you speak, even though you've been quiet for so long? It's because the story aged, and when it did, you were the only timeless thing left in it. What they once dismissed as silence, the world now sees as discipline. What they mistook for inaction, time has revealed as strategy. And the most poetic part, you were never just a character in their chapter. You were the author of your own book. And while their section is fading from memory, yours is still being written in ink that doesn't wash away. Number 12. You weren't trying to win the argument. You were mastering the narrative. Chosen one. Anyone can jump into a fight and trade blows until both sides are exhausted. That's not skill, that's impulse. Arguments are easy to start and quick to burn out. But you were never looking for a momentary win. You were shaping how the entire story would be remembered. You understood something deeper. Arguments die fast, but narratives linger. Proverbs 16:32 says, better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. You weren't battling for applause in the moment. You were planting seeds for how history, your personal history, would be told. When Winston Churchill navigated Britain through WWIE, he didn't respond to every critic in Parliament. He focused on the bigger picture, the story Britain would tell after the war. That's what you were doing in your own battle. You weren't reacting, you were curating every silence you held, every move you didn't explain, every decision you made with precision. It all sent a signal, not just to your adversaries, but to everyone watching quietly in the corners. Your consistency began to overwrite their noise. At first, people repeated what they'd heard about you, but over time, they started forming their own conclusions based on your conduct, not someone else's commentary. Nehemiah, while rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem, faced relentless slander from his enemies. He didn't stop to argue. Nehemiah 6:3 records his words, "I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down." That's exactly the posture you took, refusing to leave your higher work just to engage with lower distractions. Your restraint became a kind of pressure they couldn't counter. The more they tried to trap you into emotional exchanges, the more you gained power by staying above them. Nelson Mandela mastered this during peace negotiations. While others demanded quick public reactions, he played the long game. Knowing the narrative of unity and leadership would outlast any short-term squabble, you weren't defending a side. You were redefining the whole situation. That's why the shift happened. Neutral observers began leaning toward you, not because you argued harder, but because you reframed the room without saying much at all. It's the same energy Michelle Obama carried when she said, "When they go low, they go high." That principle isn't about passivity, it's about refusing to let someone else set the stage for your legacy. Romans 12:17-18 teaches, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you. Live at peace with everyone." You live that out, not by avoiding conflict, but by controlling its meaning. Over time, the gossip began to sound smaller. The drama started to look petty. Why? Because you had elevated the conversation. You went from being discussed to being studied. You weren't trying to prove you were right. You were building a reality they couldn't explain away. And now, the very people who once repeated lies have no choice but to talk about you with respect. Not because they want to, but because the new narrative requires it. You didn't just reclaim your power, you reshaped your presence. And that's the difference between reacting to mess and mastering the meaning behind it. Number 13. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was spiritual restraint. Chosen one. Most people have never witnessed true strength in control. They think power always looks loud. They assume that if you're quiet, it's because you have nothing to fight with. But you know better. Your stillness was never emptiness. It was loaded potential. Psalm 140, 1-3 says, "Set a guard over my mouth. Lord, keep watch over the door of my lips." That's the kind of discipline you were walking in. You didn't hold back because you lacked the weapons. You held back because you'd already learned that not every battle is worth firing them. When Mahatma Gandhi led India's fight for independence, he faced provocation after provocation. Yet his most powerful moments were not in shouting matches, but in his unyielding refusal to respond in kind. You carried the same spiritual restraint. You knew exactly what you could say, how much damage you could cause, and how quickly you could flip the narrative. But you didn't. Not because you were scared, because you had already fought the deeper war inside. You'd wrestled your ego, your pain, your pride. That's the war most people never win. Jesus embodied this when accused before Pilate in Matthew 27-14. But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. His silence wasn't weakness, it was sovereignty. You operated from that same place. People who haven't done the internal work can't comprehend it. They see calm and think it's retreat. They see restraint and think it's defeat. But what they don't know is that restraint is a weapon sharper than most words. Consider Serena Williams at the 2018 US Open final. Even in moments of controversy, she managed to gather herself and speak with measured clarity. Refusing to let frustration own her, that's restraint in action, and it carries more authority than rage ever could. You didn't hold your tongue to avoid conflict. You did it because your peace cost too much to waste on pettiness. Philippiens 4:7 promise. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That peace became your fortress. Harriet Tubman's missions to lead others to freedom demanded extreme composure. She couldn't afford loud moves or reactive decisions. Her restraint was the difference between life and death, between success and failure. You've learned a similar truth. Your maturity cannot be hijacked by someone else's insecurity. That's why they're unsettled now. They expected the version of you that once reacted. Instead, they met the version that chooses stillness, not from fear, but from a place of complete authority. Isaiah 32:17 says, "The fruit of that righteousness will be peace. Its effect will be quietness and confidence forever." Your quiet was not absence, it was confidence. It was the sound of someone who has nothing left to prove and everything still to protect. And now, they can't frame it any other way. You didn't fall back. You rose above. And that kind of elevation can't be explained, only respected. Number 14. They're switching sides. Not out of love, but out of survival. Chosen one. There's a certain shift in the air. You can feel before you even see it. The same people who stood back while others attacked you, who kept their distance when your name was under fire, are now finding ways to inch back into your space. It's not sudden affection that's drawing them. It's not a newfound conviction. It's calculation. They've noticed you've become too visible, too influential, too untouchable to ignore. There was a time when aligning with you was optional. Now, it's a strategic move. Your name, once dismissed in whispers, is now spoken in rooms you've never stepped into. And those who were once indifferent are suddenly worried about being locked out of the very doors your presence now opens. Proverbs 18:16 says, "A gift opens the way, and ushers the giver into the presence of the great. That's what's happening. Your gift is making space for you, and they're scrambling to fit themselves into that space. Not because they honor you, but because they fear being left behind. Think about how Winston Churchill's leadership during WWIE shifted the way even his critics viewed him. Many who opposed him at the start of the war began aligning with him later, not out of love for his vision, but out of the recognition that survival depended on his strategy. That's the energy in the room now, not affection, but necessity. They imagine that by being near you again, some of your strength, your reputation, or your peace might rub off on them. But proximity is not loyalty. Judas walked with Jesus for 3 years, witnessed miracles firsthand, and still sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. Buying close doesn't mean being committed. You've learned to see it clearly now. The ones who stayed silent when defending you was risky, but show up ready to cheer once the risk is gone. They're not drawn to your character, they're drawn to your cover. They're seeking protection from the cold they'll face if they remain outside your circle. It's not allegiance, it's insurance. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was winning legislative battles, some politicians who once opposed him began attaching their names to his cause, not because their hearts had shifted, but because public opinion had, and they wanted to be seen on the right side of history. And you, chosen one, have grown beyond the need for validation from those who only see your value when it benefits them. Their applause now feels hollow because you know it's not born of truth. You understand what loyalty really is. It's tested in silence, in absence, in the moments when it costs something. Nehemiah 4:14 says, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes." You're no longer fighting for the approval of the crowd. You're fighting for the integrity of your mission. That's why you can let them come back without letting them in. They will adjust to your altitude, but your grounding remains the same. As you rise, more people will want to be seen beside you, not because they respect you, but because they fear being forgotten. And that's fine. Let them shift, let them scramble. But you know the difference between alignment and allegiance. Alignment is about optics. Allegiance is about essence. Think of Nelson Mandela again. After his release from prison, many leaders who once supported apartheid began speaking favorably of him, not because they had repented in their hearts, but because they saw that his influence was unstoppable. History forced their hand, just as your influence is forcing the hand of those around you. The mess they thought would ruin you became the moment that revealed you. While they scrambled for control, chasing narratives and switching sides like it was a game, you moved with a different rhythm. Your rise wasn't noisy, it was deliberate. Every silence you kept was strategy. Every decision you made was intention in motion. You elevated without theatrics because you weren't defending yourself. You were defining yourself. Isaiah 54:15 says, "If anyone does attack you, it will not be my doing. Whoever attacks you will surrender to you." That's the reality they're facing now. Your calm authority has rewritten the entire story. When Oprah Winfrey's talk show became a cultural force, certain media voices who once mocked her scrambled to be part of her orbit. They wanted access, not friendship, connection, not commitment. The same pattern is unfolding for you. The air in the room has changed. The ones who doubted you now watch with quiet admiration or calculated alignment, but whether their reason is respect or fear, one truth stands: your strength silenced the loud ones, and your growth rattled the pretenders. You didn't just survive the storm, you became the landmark they can't ignore. And as they switch sides, remember this: what they're seeing now isn't a new version of you. It's the real version they never had the depth to understand. Psalm 75:6, -7, reminds us, no one from the east or the west or from the desert can exalt themselves. It is God who judges. He brings one down. He exalts another. God has lifted you in such a way that even those who never valued you must now acknowledge you. Let them act brand new. Let them claim connection. But don't confuse their presence for their loyalty. Only those who stood in the silence, who weathered the absence, who walked with you when there was nothing to gain, only they deserve a seat at your table. You were never just part of the story. You were always the turning point. And now, it's too late for them to pretend otherwise. Beloved, chosen one, we have reached the end of this journey together in this message. But you and I both know this isn't really an ending. For people like us, the conclusion is never a full stop. It's a doorway. If these words have stirred something deep inside you, if they made you pause, breathe a little slower, or look at yourself in a new light, then understand this: you are not here by accident. You were meant to be in this space, hearing these truths at this exact moment. This series has been more than just a collection of observations or lessons. It has been a mirror that doesn't just reflect your present, but reveals the unshakable core that has been there all along. Through every number we've walked through, you've seen yourself in the resilience, the restraint, the quiet authority, and the clarity that comes from surviving storms without losing your soul. I want to pause here and say something from the heart. Thank you, truly. Thank you for being here. Thank you for lending your attention to something deeper than quick entertainment, for choosing to feed your spirit instead of your distractions, for valuing your growth enough to sit in this space with me. Whether you've been with me since the very first message or this is the first one you've heard, your presence here matters. And I want to be clear about something. My gratitude is not dependent on your applause, your agreement, or even your support in material form. Just the fact that you have journeyed through this with me means more than you might realize. That said, if you feel led to go a step further and support this work, you can do so through the Super Thanks button here on YouTube. Your contributions help keep these messages alive, spreading them to others around the world who need a reminder that they are not alone in their battles. But please hear me. Whether you choose to give or not, you are seen, you are valued, and you are appreciated. Your willingness to listen, to reflect, and to allow these words to take root in you is a gift in itself. This space is built on connection, not transaction. You're not here as a customer. You're here as part of a community, a family of those who know what it's like to walk through fire and come out refined, not destroyed. As we close, I want to speak something over you, a blessing that you can carry into every room, every relationship, and every season from here on out. May you walk in a peace so deep that it disarms anyone who comes near you with chaos. May your path be lit in such a way that even in the valleys, you know where to place your feet. May your name be spoken in rooms you have yet to enter, not by manipulation, but by the undeniable pull of the grace and excellence you carry. May you have discernment to know who truly walks with you, and the courage to release those who only stand with you when it's convenient. May your victories be quiet enough to confuse those waiting for your downfall, but undeniable enough to inspire those who are silently rooting for you. May you never have to prove your worth to those determined not to see it. And when you face storms, because we both know there will be more, May you remember the truth we've returned to again and again in this series. Storms don't just test you, they reveal you. They uncover the difference between those who crumble and those who rise. And you, chosen one, were never meant to crumble. You are built to rise, and to rise without apology. You've seen it happen already, the tides turning, the sides switching, the narratives shifting. What was once whispered in doubt is now spoken in quiet admiration. But remember, not every voice that praises you now is loyal to you. Some are drawn to your altitude, not your essence. Keep your table sacred. Guard your inner circle. Let kindness flow from you freely. But give your trust slowly and wisely. The truth is, your journey has already rewritten the story. You were never just a supporting character in someone else's drama. You've been the turning point all along. That's why the air feels different now when you walk in. That's why even those who stayed silent in your struggle can't help but watch you with careful eyes. So I urge you, carry this awareness into your next season. Do not shrink to make others comfortable. Do not explain your rise to those who will never admit they underestimated you. Do not waste your breath defending a reputation that your life already proves. Keep building. Keep aligning. Keep choosing the high ground. Even when the low road tempts you with quick satisfaction. Because the truth is, your presence alone has already changed the room. The mess they thought would bury you became the soil you grew from. The storm they thought would drown, you became the stage where you revealed your command. And now, whether they love you, fear you, or simply can't ignore you, they know you are here to stay. If this message has spoken to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who is walking through their own storm in silence. They may not say it out loud, but they could be waiting for a word that reminds them they are more than their current season. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, not for vanity's sake, not just to follow along, but to make sure you never miss what's coming next. We don't do surface level here. We speak to the soul. We tell the truth others avoid. We name the battles and we name the victories, and we rise together. So here's to you, beloved, chosen one. Here's to your peace, your power, and your purpose. Here's to every closed door that forced you to build your own. Here's to the strength that speaks louder than any explanation you could give. And here's to the future, the one you are shaping with every step, every decision, every refusal to bow to what is beneath you. Welcome to the real ones. Welcome to the table you've built with your discipline and your discernment. Welcome to the space where storms don't define us, they refine us. Let's keep rising, higher, stronger, clearer, always.